Okay, so it looks like we're live. Uh, I'm going to start the introductions. I don't want my guests to be waiting, so we'll get this started, and then when Mark joins, he'll take over the conversation. So let's get this show on the road, as Mark would say. Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. Right now, I'm your host, Oscar Quiroz, taking over from Mark. He should be joining us any second. And today we're discussing how public media organizations are evolving, modernizing, and addressing today's challenges of how to best serve the public while also dealing with issues of how to deal with disinformation, people living in separate media bubbles, and programming controversies. Our guests today are Bob Dunlop, President and CEO of Cascade Public Media at the Pacific Northwest, Amanda Mountain, President and CEO of Rocky Mountain PBS in Colorado, and Kurt Mische, President and CEO of PBS Reno. So I'm going to send the guest an invite to start their cameras. There we go. Rob, Amanda, welcome to the show. And Kurt, if you can start your camera, that would be fantastic. And I see that Mark Oppenheim is joining us. Kurt, if you can start your video.
There we go.
There you go.
There we are.
Mark, I already took the introduction. I'll let you take over. And please enjoy the show. You're on mute, Mark.
I'm sorry that I am a little bit discombobulated. I happen to be in New York celebrating Passover with my family, and it's been a very interesting trains, planes, automobiles, traffic experience. So thank you for your patience. I'm so happy to be here together. You know, we started this show with PBS stations like yours. And we went around to the different PBS stations in order to cast a light on the nonprofits in the ecosystems all around the country. And we just had such wonderful collaborations. And when COVID hit, we had to move over to Zoom. And now the entire media landscape has changed. So it would just be great to go around the table, starting with you, Kurt, and talk a bit about how that media landscape has changed for you and how you continue to advance your own nonprofit mission of serving your communities. Kurt, you want to take it away?
Well, thank you, Mark, very much, and appreciate the invitation to join in today. The whole COVID and social media and Zoom has provided us with such a level of flexibility, an ability to further engage with our audiences. Using a number of the social platforms, we've been able to send and receive information and engage in conversations that we had never been able to do before, or had only been able to do on a limited basis. Zoom enables us to do so many creative things, including helping our staff, our team, make best use of their time, working in many cases from home or remotely, just as you're doing. So it's really been we've been able to make lemonade out of lemons. I mean, this could have really created some serious challenges, and in reality, it's worked out to our benefit.
Have you seen it as a net positive?
Yes, we have.
And Robert, how do you see it? Do you see this as a net positive? You know, I'm very interested in Kurt's assessment here, because I think that we have it within our power to take, as you say, Kurt, lemons and make lemonade out of it. But it seems to have also cascaded in a way across the PBS field and the public media field in a way that caused a lot of consternation. How do you see it at Cascade?
I do see it much the same way. I think that, the pandemic has been catalytic on a number of fronts in terms of the adoption of new ways of thinking. I guess they say crisis is the mother of invention. And so when you find yourself in challenging moments, you're looking for those ways in which you can leverage that moment into new ways of thinking. I think it has helped us in a change management process with our team to think very differently. It's helped us to engage with communities in ways we wouldn't have otherwise, in terms of being able to bring more people into some of the work that we do that we perhaps just wouldn't have pushed ourselves to do previously, because we were in a model in which we were always driving toward in-person gatherings, where perhaps those community conversations might be smaller, whereas just as you've done, you've been able to expand the audience size simply by being able to leverage some of these tools. So I think technology has done a lot to accelerate changes in media overall, and it's helped to accelerate our work as well in terms of how we spread our mission in more positive ways throughout our community.
Amanda, how do you see it from where you sit?
Yeah, I think that public media has a legacy of being relevant, particularly in times of national crisis, and the pandemic is no better example of that. As everyone is articulating, I would agree. Our station and our business, in fact, is really well positioned to help combat social isolation, build cultural bridges, make sure that we can provide a lifeline to trusted information that people need, especially when the stakes are as high as during COVID. So many people in our communities were losing their lives, and public media was the one place people could trust to learn more and get more comfortable about vaccines, to engage in the public health system in ways that they might not have felt comfortable otherwise. And so I think public media and our relevancy was on full display during COVID, certainly, and after.
You raise such an important point that public media has for so long been a trusted, neutral, perhaps by some people with a point of view a little bit more on the side of looking at social change rather than keeping things the way they are. Do you find that you are trusted in this fraught landscape? There's been so much information and disinformation, so much argument about simple things like wearing masks during a health crisis. How are you dealing with that kind of a situation, Amanda?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that question was for me. Well, first and foremost, we've done a lot of work over the years to ensure that the staff on our teams are reflective of the communities that we're serving. And so as we were having internal conversations about our own safety policies, we were going through that same negotiation that our community was going through, quite frankly, when there was a disagreement and the spectrum of beliefs were broad. And that, when we're able to build trust internally within our organizations because our staffs are diverse and reflective of the communities that we're aiming to serve, we are better positioned to build and expand the public trust in ways that are sustainable and powerful.
Yeah. We like public media I'm sorry, Rob, you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to amplify some of Amanda's remarks. I mean, I think there are so many divides in our nation right now around all different vectors, social, civic, political factors. And I think that flight to trust and credibility has never made public media more relevant than it is today. Now, that's not to say we don't have the challenges that go with also operating in a very congested media landscape where distribution and content have been, disaggregated from one another. And there's a lot happening in that space where discovery is challenging and so forth. But the mission of what public media does in terms of bringing communities together and using the tools of media for good and really to try to amplify and lift up voices in our communities, I think we've never been more relevant than we are right now.
People depend on us. And people depend on us in ways that they don't automatically depend on other media outlets. There's an emotional connection, an emotional dependence on public media, and that trust, that halo effect that we talk about all the time. We certainly don't have anchors admitting in the media that they presented misinformation that they knew was misinformation. That does not happen with public media.
I'm so glad you went there. You know, like public media, we as a organization that recruits nonprofit leaders and then draws attention to their work, we don't do any party politics, none. But we do have a sense of what American and democratic values are about, of course. And those include that if you're going to report something, that you actually believe it's true. There is an excuse for ignorance, but there's no excuse for
Right, I think we lost, we've got,
I think we-
yeah.
It
well, Mark
looks
is
like we
freeze up
lost
there.
Mark.
Yeah, that's all
Uh,
right. You know, if you don't
false
mind, Oscar, I'll
information,
jump.
and that's
I'll jump-
so I'm going on at Fox.
Oh.
With the,
Well, there we go.
yes,
there you go. I'll
I'm
let you
sorry.
take over, Mark.
Sorry about that. There is a bit of an unstable connection here. Can you get me?
Mhm.
Yeah, we
I
got you.
draw a connection
clear.
between what's going on with Dominion lawsuit with the willful dissemination of false information and some of the other things that we're seeing in social media. Do you draw similar connections, and how do we heal that as part of the mission of trying to keep faith with the public that has divergent views? So we don't want to press onto the public we don't want to become a propaganda mechanism. But how do you actually become this marketplace that we were in the past in this changing media landscape, Kurt?
Well, it's a good question. I think, you know, I do think there is on the commercial side of media, you know, there's a business model challenge that is almost toxic. And I think we see it in what is taking place in the political arena today, where we've got certain political figures for whom, you know, their presence on media and commercial media is the oxygen they need, and for whom coverage of that figure or figures end up becoming part of the business model of what feeds their work. And so they feed on each other in a very, I think, you know, somewhat destructive way when it comes to the norms we think of when we think about the purpose and the role of what media is supposed to do in the communities we serve. And that's where I think that flight to credibility and safety and trust, you know, amplifies kind of the work that we do across public media, because we don't double down on that kind of work. And instead we stick to, you know, really threading that needle very carefully around the journalistic integrity of what we do and how that best serves audiences in our community. We are not oriented around how we can line our pockets or the pockets of our ownership. We're oriented around how we can return value to our community. It's a kind of a return on impact instead of a return on investment. And so, you know, I think that's how public media is wired. And I think that's where, as this world gets more complicated and congested around these sorts of civic and social issues, public media will, you know, continue to stand out more as a bit of a beacon, if you will, for many parts of our community who are seeking just the calm and straight story. I think
and mainline media is just as much at fault. It seems that sometimes some of our journalistic colleagues in the for-profit media, they basically spin up these arguments and just and spin up these conflicts in order to also attract attention. Kurt, Amanda, what are your comments on this? And how do we avoid, you know, if conflict causes interest and conflict engages audiences, how do we engage audiences without being part of that sort of ridiculous fake conflict ecosystem?
Well, I think that we stay true to our model, to our business model, as Rob indicated. We say all the time that we can, reasonable people can disagree reasonably. And by modeling that performance in the content that we produce, by listening carefully, we talked about social media and some of those platforms a few minutes ago. The ability that has given us to listen, to hear individuals and groups that we may not have seen as easily before is a terrific tool. And we are equipped to respond to that because we don't have to worry about what's going to sell or what the return on the dollar investment is going to be, to the degree that the commercial people do. We don't have that pressure, that financial leverage hanging over our heads, and so we have the freedom to do what's correct, what's right.
So we got a question, Amanda, from Deborah Holcomb, which I'm just going there right now. And it's very interesting. She comes from a fundraising background, and there are certifications for various professions. And it seems that up till now, we've all gone on the assumption that journalism, news, even media has a certain code of ethics, but it's sort of an unwritten code of ethics. The question is it time right now to actually bring that dialogue out to the fore? And I hope I'm keeping faith with Deborah's question. Do we start looking at what our standards are, publishing our standards for broadcast in a way that is not suppressive of voices and different voices and different perspectives, but also has some sort of baseline ideas? I think it was Kurt originally said, I never thought I would see the day when people were actually putting forth information that they themselves disbelieve, right? Is it time now, Amanda? And can public media lead the way?
Absolutely. I think that first and foremost, we have collectively, between local NPR stations and local PBS stations, thousands of locally owned and operated media organizations and communities around the country who are already adopting and publishing trusted code of ethics. And so many organizations within our public media system have already made what those accountability metrics are and pledges to the community transparent by publishing those code of ethics. And I would also say that as the largest, by far, locally owned and operated media organization and system in the country, we also have a beautiful system of accountability with our business model. We are a membership organization, which is dependent on people trusting us enough to voluntarily contribute, be an investor, even though they can get all of our content for free. And so that is a check and balance in the way that we are structurally built and continue to sustain ourselves that holds us accountable to behaviors that will earn and sustain the public trust.
That is such a great point, isn't it? That membership, that idea of citizen involvement. So in part, it's up to us, right? We have to be engaged. We have to not go for the cotton candy of easy confirmation of our pre-baked beliefs, right? Kurt, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things the general public sees so much on particularly 24/7 cable channels is a blurring of the line between journalism and opinion. Most of the programs you see in those environments are talk shows in which hosts are espousing their opinions, which is permissible, of course, but when it's under the banner of news, then it suddenly gets very confusing. And that line between journalism and opinion has blurred so much so that the general public doesn't see the difference. And I think public media works really hard to focus on journalism, and we don't do opinion. We don't get into that space. We try to inform and engage our communities. And it's a huge opportunity for us to further our work in that area because of that confusion that exists out there generally.
I think it's important also just to bring to the forefront some level checking. Oftentimes, when public media is compared to, let's say, cable news, it is missed that cable news actually has very small audiences by comparison. With public media, 1 in 4 Americans are tuning into their local NPR station or watching some type of PBS content every single week. That's 1 in 4 Americans. That is a massive reach that also demonstrates our ability to engage people across spectrums of belief to build those bridges to trustworthy facts and information and cultural understanding.
How do you keep a balance on other types of programming? For example, educational programming, and I'll take a very simple, I'll take 2 simple examples. The whole idea of teaching virology, right? Which, coming out of COVID, that became very science around virology and immunization, so on and so forth, became very controversial all of a sudden. Or things like evolution, right? To some people who believe in a different approach. Do you get issues where you just try and teach things and people are really upset with how the programming that you do, not news programming, but educational programming, which is at the core of your mission, Kurt? Do you get that?
On occasion, we'll get feedback from folks that say, well, you were teaching that evolution stuff on Nova,
Right.
and we're quick to point
What
out
do you do?
that there's a balance, and that you'll see creationism mentioned in programming as well. It's that balance between all of the different programs and program sources that we do. We have a very highly developed educational outreach with educational workshops done in schools pre-K through 4th grade. We make sure there's a wonderful balance in there with all of the different lessons and PBS Kids videos that we take out.
So does that mean that you don't have a point of view on these matters, or does it mean that you try to give your audience access to the best that this diverse community has to offer and let them decide? How do you look at that?
Just like with the journalism that we've been discussing, we may all have our particular points of view, Mark, but that's not for us to espouse. We're there to present these different facts or thought processes so folks can decide for themselves what they want to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at some of the programming we present, what we're trying to do is encourage people to think and inspect and understand the world around them, not tell them how to think or what to think, but just to consider and discover. And through that discovery, they will either deepen their own, presumptions, or perhaps they will find something new about the subject matter that expands their world.
You deal with the changing tastes and demographics of your market. One of the things that really strikes me is that in the early days of public television, just like all other media, it was primarily white, right? And it was primarily people who were abled in a standard way. In other words, you didn't see people in wheelchairs, you didn't see people who were blind presented. And the first programs that I remember really breaking through that were programs like Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the children's programming. Now, your audiences and the sensibility is really changing around you. You have so many different people of different cultures and different attributes to deal with. How do you ensure that you're trying to address the needs of your full audience and not just a segment of it that happens to be to have enough money to actually contribute, right? I mean, that's part of it, right? If you're going to have members, they're going to have a certain profile. So how do you make sure that you're serving your membership or that is not your members? Do you see what I'm saying, Amanda?
I do. And to go back to the stat earlier that we talked about, 1 in 4 Americans sampling some type of public media each week, only 3% of that collective audience are active members in a local public media organization. And like you're saying, it is tempting to super serve that 3%. And there is this huge opportunity with the 97% of our audience that is more diverse, age-wise, politically, geographically, and all the different ways that audience
versus urban folks in different settings with different life skills and jobs and experiences. So that's interesting that you're actually delving into the people who aren't your members as much as you're delving into the people, and perhaps even more,
Oh,
since you only have
absolutely.
3%.
Well, and the good news is that our members are they're curious. They want to be exposed to different cultures, beliefs. They are coming to us for that education, provocation, and they stay with us as we're exploring how to serve our bigger audience. And I do think there's an opportunity that we are experimenting with to change the definition of member. Currently, members is a synonymous term with donor, and it does focus our attention at that small percentage of members. For our station, it's roughly 9% of our audience are members. And we want to create an environment of belonging with our larger audience as a whole, knowing that once people feel they belong, they are more likely to invest. And that is from the inside out. It's how are we engaging in conversations with our communities? How are we meeting the needs of our communities through the products we create, the journalism that we develop? And then how are we staying in constant conversation to be in true co-ownership with the communities that we're aiming to serve?
It's just so fascinating. Kurt, and I'm going to give Rob the last word here. Kurt, in terms of your future plans, how do you see the organization expanding? Are you investing in different ways going into the future so that you're positioned to serve an internet-based audience? Are you thinking still geographically as much as you did previously? How are you evolving?
Yes, yes, and yes. Okay. we're working on all of those fronts. We have a very large geographic area that we serve. We're here in a modern, growing university town, 5 minutes outside of the city limits. You've got farms and ranches and mines and high desert land. 40 minutes to the west, you've got Lake Tahoe and that whole community, kind of the Bay Area east, if you will. And so we have this amazing mixture of people that we have to be in contact with and listen to. So we look at the products we're producing for on air. We're looking at repurposing a lot of those things for online platforms. We've produced our first digital first series. We are completing construction of a podcast booth that is going to be sitting in a large food hall in the central part of town, part of the redevelopment of that part of town. And so we're going to be able to do our own podcasts and also rent that podcast booth out in a very trendy, if you will, hip portion of town with an amazing cross-section of people. So we're going to be able to touch all of these areas with our products and our promotion. I mentioned our education. We're in 7 counties with our educational program. We touched 72,000 children in the previous school year. We've added robotics to this. Yeah, I could go on and on and on, but the point is listening to those communities, hearing what they have to say, engaging with them in ways that are meaningful and important to them is what helps us move forward and helps to secure our future.
And the Pacific Northwest, Rob, I'm sure you're not just sort of nodding off and falling asleep as the world changes around you. How are you evolving?
So we have moved very aggressively over the last several years in producing shorter form content essentially for every distribution platform out there first. We don't produce 30 and 60-minute episodic programming anymore. We do everything for the digital environment. We have developed apps across all the major streaming services. We're doing newsletters, we're doing podcasts. We are seeking every opportunity we can to connect with that next generation of audience wherever they are spending their time. And the very grassroots efforts that both Kurt and Amanda have talked about in terms of getting out and asking our communities, what do you need? How can we help? And really trying to bring that information in a way that informs not only the content we create, but how we convene our communities. So it's almost as the world becomes, more digitized and more technology oriented, bringing that high touch component as well is where public media really should and can marry those two things in a beautiful way that helps actually inform and involve our community to make the world a better place.
So important. I have a bit of breaking news to share with you all. Just from my experience, I'm in New York, so I'm going to break some news that has nothing to do with politics or Trump or whatever. The hotel that I'm staying at has just been acquired by the city of New York. That's one of the reasons why I had some difficulty. The Wi-Fi was down and so on. And it's being acquired from the city of New York to house people who are being bussed up to New York City from the southern border. And they are asylum seekers and refugees of various sorts and so on. And the city is trying to figure out ways to house these people. So this is a community response to a national problem. And I think together, if we do our job as Americans, right? We inform each other, we try to tell the truth, we try to share, and we try to solve together. We can have such a future as is unimaginable. The greatest days of America are still ahead of us, but it depends on us, the people, you, to help us be informed to take those actions. Rob Dunlop, President and CEO of Cascade Public Media, Amanda Mountain, President and CEO of Rocky Mountain PBS, Kurt Mische, President and CEO of PBS Reno. Thank you so much. And please thank your staffs, your boards, your funders, your members, and all the people who contribute to your programming. This is just such an important part. And by the way, Amanda, I am one of those people who tune in to PBS or NPR every single day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.